Good day, and welcome to our webinar, where we're going to discuss two early season technologies that are going to have a very positive impact on your cotton production. These two technologies are Foundation LM and Radiate. My name is Stephen Sexton, and I'm Director of Technical Services for Agrison in the United States, and I assist in Australia. My wife and I lived in Australia from October of 2014 to April of 2017. We had an amazing time down in Australia. A lot of wonderful friends, and it's a beautiful country. With me here today is John Quillen. John's a proprietary product manager for Nutrient Ag Solutions here in the South Plains, Lubbock South. And for those of you that are not familiar with the CAP grows over 2 million hectares of cotton. John has been involved in cotton all of his life. He's been an independent agronomist, cotton agronomist. He has worked at a Bayer Monsanto cotton breeding research facility as a research assistant. He has been cotton production agronomist for Loveland delinting. He's been cotton production agronomist for the South Plains division. And currently he serves as a proprietary products manager. So John, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
And it's, you know, just a little bit about cotton.
I've been around it for some years now.
So good. So John has expertise, and he not only with cotton production, but with both of the technologies we're going to discuss today. The first product we're going to discuss is Foundation LM. It's a biochemical fertilizer catalyst to increase the efficiency of our applied fertilizer. And since it's a liquid, it goes in with your liquid APP starters, or Landmark has one called Liquid Boost that has the Foundation LM as part of the ingredient. But it's going to convert that phosphorus, that if we apply that liquid APP by itself, it's going to be 10 to 30% available. The phosphorus is right away, 10 to 30% efficient. And that's not good enough for the investment we have in those cotton seed genetics. So by adding Foundation LM, we're going to increase the nutrient availability and efficiency, and by increasing more root hairs, and the root system will uptake more of that nutrition as it's made available. And it's also a stress product too, isn't it, John? It helps mitigate water stress.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is. It's going to add a lot of benefits to help that crop reach its yield potential and increase its water use efficiency as well.
So John, what do you notice? You work with all the major suppliers. You work with Dow, you work with Syngenta, Monsanto. What do you see in their attitudes towards biochemical products? How has that changed over the last 5 years?
You know, in the past, I think that people looked at it as a snake oil, as something that was just trying to get the wool pulled over someone's eyes. But the more research that goes into these type of products, the more that everyone around the world is seeing the benefits of these things. And you can see from Monsanto and other leaders in the industry, such as Landmark, that these are important. And these type of products are going to be the future of bringing technology into the fertility realm. There's been a lot of technology developed for ag equipment, for new crop varieties. There's a lot of new interesting technology, but the fertilizer industry has been lagging behind. And so this technology is going to bring that fertilizer into the current day,
into the 21st century.
Into the 21st century, exactly. So it's going to be a very exciting time to see just how we can bring these fertilizers up and get more out of them.
And you know, we haven't even discussed the science behind these technologies, but Loveland Products owns Agrison, which has a research and R&D facility in Pilot Point, Texas, with 27 scientists, 10 of which are PhDs from all around the world. We also have a research agreement with CH Biotech in Taiwan that has a brand new 8-acre facility with a 300,000 square foot greenhouse and laboratory. So these technologies we're going to talk about today, Foundation LM and Radiate, are backed by science. So why is the biochemical approach, which is active constituent in Foundation LM, why is that more important than biological? Well, biologicals have a shelf life. They're living. And if you mix them with salt-based fertilizers like a liquid APP, it will kill the microbes. But the biochemistry, the enzymes and acids and chelators, we know that when we produce those in Denton, Texas, and in this case, we produce Foundation LM in Dandenong, Victoria, that we strip out the water, we concentrate the biochemistry so we can apply it at very low concentrations per hectare. Since we're putting it with the fertilizer, we don't worry about the soil type. It's highly compatible with crop protection chemistries as well, which are salt-based. But we want to induce that specific, repeatable plant growth response.
So the biochemicals that are in Foundation LM, they're the chemicals that bacteria produce. And those chemicals are what gets the reaction out of that fertilizer that helps break down other nutrients that may be locked up in the soil. The biological organisms that are in that soil, a lot of times those soils do not have an environment that are conducive for those bacteria and soil organisms to live and thrive, such as drought or maybe high salt salinity type areas. So adding a product such as Foundation LM, where you're adding the biochemistry of these biological organisms, you can get these results out of these biocatalysts that you would get if you had a very high microbial population, even if that soil does not have an environment that's conducive for supporting such a biological population.
Thank you, John. That's an excellent explanation. So if you have a liquid program, we're putting on 5 liters per hectare in with your APP. If you do not have a liquid program and you have a dry program, we can apply the sister product, which has the same active constituent. It's called Basis XC at 2 liters per ton on your dry fertilizer. But we are going to release those tied up nutrients and convert them into plant available forms with these products. And by adding it, mixing it with what we're doing already, it's easy for you to use, but we have it backed with, it's backed by third party and university research. So John, what is in the active constituent? It's not an easy product to talk about.
No, you can pull up a herbicide label and say, this is the active ingredient in this herbicide. But since Foundation LM is created with such a large, massive quantity of different biological organisms, we get a large range of active ingredients. So there are 500 different active ingredients within Foundation LM. Each one of those ingredients does different things in the soil. But maybe you could take a second and maybe explain some of the things that those ingredients do.
Well, I'm going to go down to the very bottom there, John. This is one that we've just identified in the last year or two. It's called siderophores, and they're a biochemical molecule that act as a chelator. When the biochemistry makes the nutrition available, it helps to immobilize and mobilize those nutrients. They're held there in place so the plants can either intercept them or use them. There's organic acids, there's amino acids, there's fulvic acids, and fulvic acids act as chelating agents too to hold nutrition. So very complex technology.
Yes, sir, it is. And it's hard to get your head around, but I think seeing its action in the field is really going to show exactly what this product can do.
And the other key about this, John, this is sustainable technology. Where we make it both in Dandenong and in Denton, we capture water, because when we run it through the RO system and we strip out 70% of the water, we reuse the water. We're not putting anything down the drain. There's no emissions into the atmosphere, and there's no toxic, product left over to dump out on a field, dump somewhere. It's a very green, sustainable technology.
Right, and the broad spectrum of ingredients in this allows it to be used in almost any soil type in the world.
So let's talk about the importance of the biochemistry. Now, this data comes from the University of Western Australia, and it's an average of 40 paddocks. And what they were doing with this research is they wanted to determine which variable, and if you look down the left-hand side, you'll see the production variables, which variable explain most of the variability in yield. Well, I lived in Australia long enough to know it's the driest country in the world. Western Australia isn't the driest state. We know that South Australia is, but Western Australia has its periods of dryness. So in my opinion, John, when you looked at climate, which is rainfall, and they got anywhere from 206 to 211 mil, which is, we would see as 8 to 8.5 inches of rain, I would think that that would explain a lot of variability in yield. But when you look at the number, it's only, if you round up, it's only explaining 4%, which we want this number over here to be close to 100%, right? So that would mean it was a 1-to-1 correlation.
Correct.
So when we go down this chart, we see the agronomy or the applied nitrogen only explain 9.5% of the variability in yield. The physical content or the clay content was 9%. The chemistry of the soil explained close to 0% of the yield variability. But when they added the labile carbon, and when we think of that fraction of the soil where organic matters in various levels of stages of decomposition that we've all referred to as humus, when we look at the labile carbon, the mineralizable nitrogen that we get out of that humus, and the microbial biomass, when you add those up, that explains 62% of the variability in yield. That shows you it's very, very powerful, that living portion of the soil.
Yes, sir. That is a very large statistical difference. That's right. That is where the rubber meets the road in showing what is actually influencing our yields.
Well, so, you know, a lot of growers, John, they'll say, well, I'm just going to, and I've been guilty of this when I farm, I'm going to go sling more nitrogen out. You know, nitrogen's a key, right? It's, the field always needs nitrogen, right? Well, no, not always. And very revealing study. Another study from the DPI, Department of Primary Industries in New South Wales, is a compilation of 3,000 data points. And these were all canola Pat trials. And basically what they charted the vertical axis is grain yield in tons per hectare over the horizontal axis in biomass. And what this shows is you increase the biomass, the R squared value, if you look at that far upper right-hand corner, the R squared value of a high biomass relating to a high yield is almost 0.9, which is almost 1.0, which is a very, very high correlation. So what we see with this, with Foundation LM and Basis XC, we see increased biomass. That probably means we got more solar panels and we're going to increase more yield too.
Correct.
So what 5 things, John, does biochemistry do in the soil?
So you've got enzymes to break down organic matter, you know, to transform these nutrients into energy. You have proteins and to signal changes in the microbe response. So soil microbes cannot communicate like you and I do. They communicate through chemical signals. So whenever you apply Foundation LM, which is basically a jug of concentrated chemical signals, then these microbes react to that chemical signal. So the microbes that are naturally present in the environment that it's applied, they will respond to these chemical signals and become more responsive. So you get that action as well. So you have antibiotics in there to reduce your competition, and then you have chelators, like we explained earlier,
yes.
To not only when we break down this plant nutrition, but we want to hold it in that plant available form until the plant can use it. So there's where the chelators come into play. And then we have compounds that reduce plant rooting, physiological change, help with the immune response of that plant, help with abiotic stress factors. There are a lot of things that those compounds do, but it all relates back to plant health, and a healthier plant can achieve higher yields.
So how is it acting, John, in the soil when a grower spreads a fertilizer and there's so many million kilograms of soil per hectare in the top 30 centimeters or 60 centimeters. And the plant senses that because it's been communicated through these microbial signaling that, hey, there's not very much fertilizer here, and you see the puny root system. How is the Foundation LM helping to improve that situation?
So as Foundation LM increases the nutrient availability, along with the compounds in it that help that plant grow and be healthier, it's going to intercept more of the soil solution, have more contact with the soil itself, and be able to access more of these nutrients. And if you take this example right here, phosphate has a very strong affinity to calcium. And in a high calcareous, high pH soil, phosphate becomes locked up very quickly. A lot of our fertilizers, such as is a polyphosphate. That's what a lot of growers around the world
use. A lot of MAP and DAP in Australia.
And so as these phosphates break down to become plant available, well, they get tied up to calcium. And so what I've found over time is growers will add more and more and more phosphate fertilizer in order to have enough plant available for that plant to use. But if we can use a product like Foundation LM to help break loose some of that phosphate that may be tied up in that soil, and you get that plant available, then it's going to be very beneficial. Let's use what we've already put out there. Let's not overload our soils with fertilizer in order to get the yields we're after. And so we get more nutrients are readily available. We have the increased root growth. And then as we break up some of these salts and tied up nutrients in the soil, we're going to get better soil tilth. That soil is going to be healthier, and that plant is going to grow through that soil much easier. The roots will be able to spread through that soil easier when it's not all bound up with all these other things that infect or impact the soil architecture.
So one of the first trials we did in cotton actually was with Dr. Joseph Klepper. He's at Auburn University, and this happens to be with a 3-18-18, an orthophosphate fertilizer. And you can see by adding just 2.5 liters per hectare in with the orthophosphate compared to the orthophosphate by itself, look at that root system, John, and it's pretty impressive.
It is. You can see that the treated side is substantially bigger. We can't see in this to drill down with a microscope, but just in the larger roots that you can see available, we know we have more root hairs.
Yes.
And so those root hairs are where that plant is exchanging and gathering up nutrients and water to reach the higher yields that it has potential to get to.
In the trial that was conducted by Tom McGuire and David Armitage at Condamine Plains with urethans in 2013-14, what we set up there was several treatments. We set up a grower standard with no liquid APP applied at planting. Then we had FlowFos, which is a liquid APP, FlowFos alone, and FlowFos with Foundation LM. And we see a 0.3 of a bale yield increase per hectare. And it was very similar for the pillar. The pillar's a 7-17-3 with micronutrients, and it was 14.59 bales per hectare. And with the Foundation LM, it was a 1/4 of a bale more. And both of those, if you look 0.3 of a bale on a $500 bale, you're talking $150. It's about a $30 per hectare treatment. Now, we put University of Arkansas, which they grow a little cotton in Arkansas, but you see a similar yield response with the Foundation there, much like we did at Condamine Plains, the grower standard without Foundation and the grower standard with. Now, what was interesting, John, they threw the basis treatment. Basis is a treatment for dry fertilizer, and we see that the dry fertilizer and both Foundation LM and those that don't have liquid that can put basis XC on their dry fertilizer, we got a really nice yield increase there too.
Well, basis is essentially super concentrated Foundation LM. So seeing the same response makes sense that you would see that, because that's what the product is. So whether you're putting it in your liquid fertilizer or putting it in there with your dry fertilizer blend, you're going to see similar response.
And it doesn't matter if it's in Australia, they don't grow any cotton in Canada, or the United States. cotton is cotton, soil is soil. These are fertilizer catalysts, and they're going to work wherever you put them out. This trial, I believe, was done by Dale Clark. It was in Rowena, New South Wales. The Foundation LM at 5 liters per hectare increased the yield by over 6/10 of a bale per hectare. That's very, very significant, especially on the cost of the Foundation LM at about $30 per hectare. But that's a significant yield response. Now, here's an interesting study that was conducted by Dale Clark and Moree, where they had the control. Then they had the basis on the dry fertilizer, and that was about a half a bale. Then they added the Foundation in with the basis, and we got another half a bale. So combined, they're a bale more than the grower standard. So John, what we've seen this in the States with some of these nutritional products that work well together. We see 1 + 1 = 3.
Correct, and we see that here as well. Across my geography, adding this technology, getting more use out of these fertilizers, getting more water use efficiency out of these fertilizers. The large number of soil microbes that are used to create Foundation LM, it doesn't matter where the soil is or what soil type it is, it's going to help that fertilizer become more efficient.
In Weewall last year, the yield was right about, on 2 different trials, it was right about 2/10 of a bale per hectare for the Foundation LM treatment. And the St. George trial, which is very, very interesting, this is with Eastern Australian Agriculture. And again, I give Kerry Jochimson all the credit, and Ross, who's the managing director at Eastern Australian Agriculture. But in this trial, we had the Foundation LM was put out with Awaken at 2 liters per hectare in a pre-plant fertilizer program, and it was followed up with Awaken at 2 liters per hectare at mid-squaring. Now, they ran out of water in this trial, and in some places, some of these plots did not receive the desired number was 10, or up to even, there were some that were at 11, but they wanted to get 10 waterings out. A lot of them got 8 waterings. They were 2 waterings short. But the interesting thing is that the Foundation LM treatment, they out-yielded the district average. They got fully 10 waterings, but yet they didn't sacrifice their fiber quality, the micronair, and their staple length. And so the fact that the Foundation LM treated plants were healthier, and they could mitigate the stress because they had a bigger root system, a healthier plant. So John, when's the best time to put on Foundation LM or for the liquid starter program, or Basis XC with the dry?
So I like to put Foundation LM, pre-plant or at planting, where those roots are going to be. That's where you want it. I also like to apply it with any other liquid fertilizer application to help that fertilizer be more efficient. So if you're putting any type of liquid fertilizer out, that would be the time to add Foundation LM. And then the basis being a treated, treatment for your granular fertilizer is obviously just going to go out when you have your dry fertilizer applied.
So the timing info at planting, but we really want to put it with our liquid starters. For Foundation LM, and 5 liters per hectare is a suggested application rate, but it can be custom blended. And I know that Landmark has a product called Liquid Boost, which is a cotton starter that has Foundation LM in it. So John, would you like to summarize what Foundation does?
So it increases nutrient availability and uptake. It enhances the nutrient use efficiencies within the fertilizer program by keeping those fertilizers available longer and breaking down the fertilizers that may be tied up within the soil. Whenever you do that, you're going to increase your crop performance. You're going to get higher yields. You're going to get better water use efficiency. It's a very easy product to use. You can apply it with any type of liquid starter fertilizer. it is as easy to add to that as adding water. It is a very, very easy product to use.
So with that, we're going to transition. We're going to go from amending our fertilizers to talk about a very exciting product that's being launched in Australia this year. Radiate. It's a plant growth hormone, and John is the expert on it. So, John, will you please explain to the growers what Radiate is?
So Radiate is a plant growth hormone package, and what it does is it promotes root and shoot growth in basically any type of crop that if it has roots, you can use Radiate on it. We're going to be talking specifically about cotton, but adding roots to any type of crop is going to help it handle stress easier because it's going to have more access to nutrients and water. You're going to improve that early season plant vigor. Cotton plants are very tender and are susceptible to stresses when it's young. So improving that early season plant vigor and reducing that stress. And finally, it's a very easy product to use. It mixes very well with most fertilizers and pesticides. So what it's going to do is it's going to help that plant grow better and have bigger, healthier roots. So as we go through this, we're going to go into the details of it and just see what it does.
And why is IBA, and that's a mouthful, endobutyric acid, why is that important?
Well, it not only promotes cell elongation, but it promotes cell differentiation. So whether you're talking about lateral roots and root hairs, or looking at the vascular tissue within a plant, having cell differentiation, increasing the fruiting capacity of that plant, the branching, the number of bolls, increasing your water uptake, and your lateral roots and root hairs. The lateral roots are very important to spread out in the soil itself, but once you have those roots out there, increasing the number of root hairs actually exponentially increases that plant's ability to access that water and nutrients, because that is where the water and nutrients enter the plant. So
it's port of entry into the plant. That's right.
Correct.
So there's some other proprietary nutritional ingredients. What does that do for the cotton plant?
So again, you're going to stimulate that cell division. Some products out on the market, such as gibberellic acid, they will stimulate cell expansion, but not necessarily cell division. So cell division is actually increasing that plant's biomass. It is increasing the number of cells within that plant. You're going to promote shoot growth, so you're going to get a more vigorously growing plant. You're going to promote that nutrient mobilization within the plant through that cell differentiation, getting more vascular tissue, helping that plant get those nutrients throughout the plant better. And then you're going to push your reproductive development. You're going to have more bolls per plant and more lateral branches, lateral fruiting branches. And whenever you take some of the stresses out of that plant, you're going to delay your leaf senescence. So you're going to have that solar panel out there providing all that energy coming into that plant to go into your reproductive fruiting sites.
It does a lot.
It does.
It's a busy product.
Yes, sir.
So how is this going to help with the root hairs and how nutrients move in the soil or don't move in the soil? How are those increased root hairs going to help?
So you have your zone directly around the root that you have immobile nutrients that plant can access, and then you have your zone of uptakes for mobile nutrients. In either scenario, the more roots you have going throughout this zone of the soil, the more your contact you're going to have access with that. Because whatever that you're going to, when you're looking at immobile nutrients, if that plant is not contacting that soil, you're not going to have access to those nutrients. And then adding those root hairs, like we talked about earlier, is going to increase the number of those root hairs. So each one of those root hairs is also contacting that soil to access these nutrients that are in the soil or in the soil solution.
Yeah. So what are we looking at here, John?
So Radiate is a very fast-acting product. The plant responds to it very quickly. And so what we can see in these two pictures, on the left, you have your untreated control. And on the right, we have a treated plant looking at the root. And specifically, we're looking at the number of root hairs. So the left is untreated. The right would be a plant treated with 150 milliliters per hectare of Radiate. And you can see after 7 days after treatment, the number of root hairs on this root are substantially greater than in the untreated control. And that's what we've been talking about, is getting those root hair numbers up so that we can access more water and nutrients in the soil.
And that's port of entry for nutrients and water. So when we look at some of the work that Casey Onis and Dale Clark, they both happen to be out of Moree now. Casey moved over from Tamworth, but it's easy to see that 150 mil per hectare rate. There's a big difference in the root and the shoot. Is that what Radiate's supposed to do?
Yes, sir. And I have pictures like this from Texas that I've taken on the tailgate of my pickup as well. It's a very quick, easy response, and dig those plants up, wash the roots off, and you can see exactly what Radiate brings to the table.
We see this again when the plant's a little bit more advanced in age. We see more top growth, and we see a bigger taproot.
You see a healthier, more vigorous plant. It has handled the stresses a lot better than the untreated check. So you see a much more vigorous, healthy plant. And
it looks like to me it's advanced to maturity.
Yeah. Whenever that plant is not struggling through those stresses, when it gets the help it needs to get through some of those stresses, you get a healthier plant that's going to start fruiting earlier, that's going to be putting on more fruit. It has more access to water and nutrients, so it's going to keep on growing.
Now and there's some more that the Australians like to use a term when they compare something. They like to say it's chalk and cheese. It's a big difference. And all these pictures, it's chalk and cheese where the Radiate's been applied. So let's look at some actual, we're looking here at nodes. We're looking at bolls and fruiting branches. And John, what are you seeing here?
So you can see with the lower rate treatment versus the control, the number of bolls that you've increased and the number of fruiting branches. So obviously the number of fruiting branches, the more bolls that you're going to have. And then you can see that it's 28% more fruiting branches and 26% more bolls. But I think once we look at the next slide and see the yield differences, you can see that it brings a lot of yield to this field.
That's a full bale.
Yes.
That's significant at the
lower range.
At the lower range. Yeah, it's a bale and a half, over a bale and a half, with no 2.5 bales at the higher range.
So having that plant with more roots, more root hairs, handling that stress better, it brings a lot of yield at the end of the day, and puts money in that grower's pocket.
Dale Clark did a second trial on Magendie, and pretty much the same thing.
Correct. And then whenever you look at the yield on this, you'll see that it's a very similar yield response. You're looking at 3.37 bales per hectare, moving up to 3.89 bales per hectare with a low rate treatment, and then moving up to 300 milliliters, you get that 14.53, and adding that many pounds of lint per hectare for something that is such a low cost to add into your fertility program it speaks volumes with the data that we see here.
And Dale, we've talked about Radiate, and Radiate is the focus, is the big topic because it's a launch product. But they've been using Awaken in Australia for several years, and Awaken has worked very, very well at 1 to 1.2 liters per hectare, up to 2 liters in cotton. You told me that Awaken and Radiate combination is dynamite for cotton.
It is, because you have the nutritional value that the Awaken brings and the proprietary nutrition that we have in that. Whenever you add Radiate to that, then you get that 1-2 punch to really get that cotton to respond. It is a very visual, easy thing to see in the field, especially if you split a field, you'll see it
And
very quickly.
John, what's the timing on that Radiate Awaken combo? Is it that 2 to 6 leaf stage?
I like to start applying these products once you get true leaves on the crop. So whenever you 2 to 6 true leaves, essentially what you need is you need a surface area for that product to get into the plant. Cotyledons have a very thick cuticle, and it's hard to get product into those leaves. But once you get true leaves onto that plant, you can start applying these products. That way it can get into the plant.
So would you like to review, John, with us the timing and application and compatibility?
Yeah, so it's best to start adding Radiate early on in the growing season, because you want to start that plant with more roots early. And the more roots you start early, the more roots you have at the end of the day, because those roots turn into more and more and more. So we want that to start that earlier. Later applications are beneficial because you're still adding roots, you're still adding root hairs, but starting early, you get that exponential effect of rooting throughout that soil. Your suggested application rate is 150 to 300 milliliters per hectare. Really, anything over 300 milliliters is not recommended. I think your return on investment starts falling off right there. So really, that 300 milliliters is going to be your good spot to stick with. And if you may want to even drop down to that 150 milliliters. You can apply this multiple times. The compatibility with this is very good. It's got a lot of different advantages of being able to mix with things. I like to mix them with our foliar fertilizers, but I also like to mix it with herbicides. Radiate has a very good way of boosting that plant's metabolism and help it grow through a herbicide application. A lot of people will notice when they make a glyphosate application or any type of herbicide application to a crop, the crop slows down and stops growing as quickly. That's because that plant has to metabolize a herbicide. It may not kill that plant or hurt it, but it does slow its growth down. So adding Radiate to that herbicide program can actually increase that plant's metabolism, help it grow through the stress of adding that herbicide, and increase our root growth at the same time. Really, whenever we're applying Radiate, we want to get good coverage. So I like using a good adjuvant such as Li-700. Li-700 has a pH reducer in it, and it also has the Less Tech technology built into it. So what that does is Radiate, having the Endobutyric acid, it is slightly acidic, and it likes to live in a slightly acidic environment, in solution in the tank. So Li-700 helps with that. The Less Tech helps it get it to the plant, helps it stick it onto the plant, and it helps it get it into the plant without disrupting the cuticle of the leaf. So you get much more mobility going through that plant. So you get the maximum effect of these products.
And John, just to review one more time, when would you like to see Radiate applied?
Start early at that 2 to 6 true leaf stage to get the maximum benefit out of Radiate, so that those roots can get as big as possible throughout the growing season and access all those water and nutrients.
So Radiate, it's a plant growth promoting product technology that promotes root and shoot growth, improves that early season vigor, and a very key point, it helps the plant mitigate stress, not just drought stress or heat stress, but also helping the plant metabolize crop protection products. When we spray our herbicides on the cotton plant, Radiate will help the plant mitigate that stress and metabolize through that stress period. It's applied at the 2 to 6 true leaf stage, and it can be applied in a tank mix with other herbicides or definitely with Awaken. John, anything that I missed?
I don't believe so. So visit your local landmark agronomist for more information. You can also find information at www.loveland.landmark.au, and follow and read your labels. And with that,
John, we appreciate having you on and your expertise, and thank you for your time. And to our Australian mates, we say good day.